If you've been following Team Orlando news for a little while now, then 1, you're probably somehow employed in the modeling and simulation industry. 2, you're possibly located in Central Florida. Or 3, somehow you clicked on this link and here you are. Welcome to the AIM on MS&T podcast. If you're familiar with our website or social media, you know that we specialize in news and information about Orlando's modeling, simulation, and training community. We post and write articles about various Team Orlando organizations and individuals in a city that is more known for theme parks. But we said, why not hop on the podcast train and give you something to listen to on your morning or afternoon commute? I'm your host, Kate Finkel, and we thought for our first episode, we would introduce you to Mary Trier, who is the president and CEO of Capital Communications and Consulting, which powers Team Orlando News as well as this podcast. First off, Mary, welcome to the AIM on MS&T podcast. We are glad you are here.
Thanks, Kate. First, I want to start by saying thank you for your hard work to get this podcast off the ground, along with Shane Klistinsky, the associate editor of Team Orlando News, and the entire staff of Team Orlando News. We're excited about this podcast.
Anyone who's been involved in the Team Orlando space for a while now knows that you've been an active member in this community. For those who might be newer to this community, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, how did you get started in this space?
So my background in the modeling, simulation, and training industry started in really the 80s, but I learned a lot more when I moved from Virginia to Orlando, which is, everyone knows, is the epicenter for modeling, simulation, and training. Mm-hmm. And I was in the administrative field. I worked for the Army. At the time, it was called Project Manager for Training Devices, or PM Trade, which later became the Simulation, Training, and Instrumentation Command. And I learned a lot about the industry, a lot about people, which is always the most important thing, is the relationships you have. And my knowledge about the things that were being produced to train our military service members, and my love for that just started there.
And how did you become a small business owner?
So as I mentioned, I worked for the Army. I had a career as Congressional and Public Affairs officer when we became a major subordinate command in the organization called STRICOM, which is now PEO STRI. They needed a public affairs and congressional affairs officer, and I grew up doing that. I had a passion for it. It gave me a lot of insight to the programs and the people and how important that was to our military. When I decided to leave the government, I wanted to offer small businesses an opportunity to have some professional communications and public affairs support. So I started Capital Communications at that time. That was 18 and a half years ago.
For those who aren't completely familiar with Team Orlando News, can you describe it a little bit more? What is it? How it came to be?
Yes, but first I want to start with what is Team Orlando, because maybe many of our listeners will already know that, but perhaps some don't. I wanted to go all the way back to 1950 when the Army and Navy secretaries signed a formal agreement to work together. The Navy was working up in New York in the Guggenheim estate, and they had an office that was focused on training devices. The Army had a separate office, and someone really smart decided that it would be a good idea to partner those two organizations. And when they moved from New York to Orlando in the 60s, the Army moved with them. The partnership just grew from there. And later, the Marine Corps had a liaison officer here that became PM Traces, and the Air Force had an Air Force liaison officer, and that organization became AFMS, the Air Force Agency for Modeling and Simulation. So that's a little bit about the history of how Team Orlando came to be. What they do is really important because they collaborate on technologies, on programs. And an example of that would be if the Army has a training simulation system that might be beneficial for the Marine Corps has an opportunity to buy into that, maybe adding some features that now come back, and the Army benefits from that as well. So doing things like that makes sense, that saves money, and they have a really great impact on our warfighters and the readiness, not only locally but nationally and internationally. And Team Orlando News came to be. My company had previously been under contract with Team Orlando, and later, after the contract ended, we noticed a void. So a lot of it is giving back to the community for Capital Communications. So we established the platform and we began to populate that. It covers the Team Orlando members, the formal members of Team Orlando, which include military, academia, and industry. And we brought in the industry segment so that they have a role to participate as well. So we're looking at covering all of the events and technologies, what's new, keeping people informed about Team Orlando. And that's our unique focus, is Team Orlando.
Now that the viewers have some insight into more of your background and Team Orlando News, going forward, what kind of role do you hope to see Team Orlando News play in the community in years to come?
Team Orlando News has been active. We launched it in May of 2021, so it's 3.5 years old. Initially, we covered events and activities, people, and I'll stress again how important people are in any industry, but in our industry, it's very important. I see us doing more of the same. This is something new, the podcast, and other efforts I think we continue to build whenever there is a reason or a new technology that we can use to help get the information out to the widest audience. So we're already engaged in the website platform, on social media. You can find us on X, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And now we're starting this podcast, and we hope to continue to share news stories that are beneficial and help build our ecosystem.
Thank you for explaining that. I feel like it sums it up pretty well. One of the biggest events in the industry, actually the world's largest modeling, simulation, and training event, which is called ITSEC, is coming up pretty soon. Are there any other events coming up this year that you are looking forward to having Team Orlando News cover? And what should we let our listeners know about?
Well, let me start with ITSEC, because the ITSEC conference, ITSEC stands for Inter-Service Industry Training, Simulation, and Education Conference. It is the largest in the world, and it takes place every year here in Orlando. And if companies and organizations are interested or they see a tie to the modeling, simulation, and training industry, that is a must-do. In some way, even if you're just attending, it is a must-do. Other events that we're going to be looking at, I have to mention the Central Florida Tech Grove, which they've become really a magnet for a lot of events for many organizations, not just the Team Orlando board members. So sometimes the Team Orlando organization, like PEO STRI or NOC TSD or AFMS or DHA, will hold an event. We cover many of those events in person and sometimes virtually, but that is something that people can find out information on, all these events, on our website, teamorlando.org. We have an events calendar, and you can find out about the Central Florida Tech Grove events there. But also, I want to make a mention of the National Center for Simulation. One of the events that we're covering for them is the business-to-business event that will be held at Full Sail University. That's on September 19th. If you can't attend, just look for the news because we'll be publishing some information about that. There will be some Team Orlando board members there that will be having a Q&A session. So we'll cover that. We're also covering the NCS Modeling Simulation Hall of Fame. That's going to be October the 23rd down at the Orange County Convention Center. And the Hall of Fame this year will be adding 3 new members that will bring a total, I think, to about 42 people. We're honoring because of their past and how they paved the way in their career for the modeling, simulation, and training industry. This year we're inducting Dan Holzenbeck, Dr. Dan Holzenbeck from the University of Central Florida, who is a posthumous award. He was very instrumental in getting the partnership buildings along with the National Center for Simulation. Those buildings allow the government and UCF to collaborate and occupy space, which is really an amazing contribution for the industry. Additionally, Dr. Carolina Cruz Rivera will be inducted as well. She is at the University of Central Florida now, but she's credited for inventing the cave, which is an immersive system. The last inductee is Daryl Holt from EA Sports. Probably most of our audience knows what EA Sports is.
Yeah.
So that will be a great night, a good way to honor the people and their families for what they've done to build the industry that we have today, which is thriving, over $7 billion industry here in Central Florida.
Those all sound very exciting, and we are looking forward to covering those as well. With that, I think we just completed our very first episode. I would first like to thank Mary for being our first guest and joining us today. I would also like to thank everyone who gave us a listen on here, and we cannot wait to keep you informed about the Central Florida modeling and simulation community. Don't forget to check out our website, teamorlando.org, for more recent news and upcoming events that you may want to attend and need more information on. We would really appreciate if you gave us a follow on here, and we will talk to you in the next podcast episode.